rates inevitably climbed. Mixed families were formed. There was a rising tide of sexual abuse. It's a known fact that when a family divorces, a couple divorces, and a new partner is introduced into the household, generally the children stay with the mother. There are exceptions, but that's the most common way it happens. When a new male partner is brought into the home, whether he marries or simply cohabits, the incidence of child sexual abuse rises 500%. 5x. And with that comes the seeds of destruction for LGBT, because when children are sexually abused and prematurely sexualized, that's the single best predictor of whether they will become gay or lesbian. There are others. I don't want to make it sound simplistic, but I'm just showing you what happens. So trust had been broken, and as a result, family and home were no longer deemed safe places. And in fact, in many places, they became mockable. And that's why we get shows like Modern American Family, because they're mocking what is family. All right. So the promise of patriotism at the national level became sullied through unwise national decisions that may not have been true to the values espoused by countries like yours and mine, because we went to war together in Vietnam. The anti-war protests of that era remain a mute reminder and an open sore on the national conscience, at least of the United States. And just so the promise of the church, and hence of God himself, became sullied through the sexual abuse crisis, the scandals of what went on, not just in Australia, but in the United States and through Europe. Here's an interesting statistic. At the beginning of the year, of this millennium, in the year 2000, 90% of the Irish population was in church on Sunday. At that late day, 90% were in church. And then the sexual abuse scandal, pedophile priests, same thing you guys have here, it broke in Ireland. Today, 18 years later, in Ireland, less than 10% of the population goes to church. The brand promise was ruptured, and people said, we're done. We don't want anything to do with the church. They might, maybe, say that they believe in God, maybe. But they don't want anything to do with the institutional church. On the Protestant side, we saw the fall of the televangelists, many of the bizarre and arcane behaviors, in some cases affairs. But when brands fail, there's nobody to blame but those in charge of the brand. So simply put, our leaders failed us. And to the extent that we are the leaders, we failed. And this is why we have to look ourselves in the mirror. I'm thinking of the song by Michael Jackson. I'm looking at the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to make a change. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. Oh yeah. Michael Jackson was a prophet. He was singing what we need to be hearing. So we have to clean up our churches, we have to clean up our staff, we have to clean up ourselves if appropriate. So whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, you are in the trust business. It's the Lord's business for sure, but it's still a business because the cash comes in and cash goes out, and you got to be here tomorrow, and you got to sustain, and you got a physical plant to maintain, or you rent a hall that you have to give back in the same condition you took it, and so forth. So sustainability in business is based on trust. And we see this decline in the church, and that tells me there's no sustainability, and that tells me we have a trust problem. And in fact, marketers like to talk about the linkage between trust and transactions, because brands with high levels of trust and confirming repeated transactions are sustainable. Now, I don't know what's going to happen based on this new ad campaign that Steve showed me at lunch, but Apple Computer has, up till now anyway, been a poster child of that, because of the almost rabid loyalty that its followers display for its products. In fact, Apple Computer has a position, it's a C-level position, it reports to the CEO, and the title of that job is not CFO, Chief Financial Officer. It's not CIO, Chief Information Officer. It's not CTO, Chief Technical Officer. Those jobs all exist. This job is called Chief Evangelist. The sole function of that C-level executive is to win the loyalty and keep the brand promise of Apple Computer across all of its platforms. Because Apple recognizes the importance of continuing to deliver on its brand promise and bringing others into the fold. There are other examples of this, Southwest Airlines in my country, Cisco Systems, and up until the huge kerfuffle over Qantas in 2011, the lockout that happened, the Flying Kangaroo was an example of brand promise in this country. So was Holden Motor Cars for a working man's car. I mean, the upper classes bought BMWs and Mercedes like everywhere else in the world, but Holden was the Aussie brand that everybody got. If they were a tradie or Aussie bloke. So the Qantas kerfuffle was an unmitigated disaster because by treating its workers as it had, the management of the company broke the bond of trust that it had for decades with the people of Australia. And when trust is broken, it is not easily regained. Think of a marriage where one or the other member has cheated and how hard it is to put the marriage back together. So sometimes it can't ever be regained, but by contrast to all of that negative news, sustainable brands carry an expectation that they do things the right way and will continue to do so. And not only that, they'll knock themselves out to make things right if they become aware that something is wrong. You know, I had a situation a while back with something I bought, and it didn't work, and I called. The company said, "Oh, you know, that's entirely our fault. We're going to send you a label so you can return it at no charge, and tomorrow we will have a replacement on your doorstep." They didn't ask me to return the original before I got the new one. They just said, "It'll be there tomorrow." And FedEx showed up at my door at 8:30 in the morning, and there it was, and that one worked. You know what that did? It told me that that was a reliable company that I wanted to do business with. Now think about all that that implies in the church. And, you know, don't beat yourself up. This is not intended to be a leader bashing session. It's intended to be a session where we do look at ourselves and we say, could I be doing better here? Because Jan Carlson, who was the CEO of SAS Airlines in the 1970s, SAS at the time was the best airline in the world. And Jan Carlson said, the secret of success is to do 100 things 1% better than your competitor, rather than to do one thing 100% better. So look at everything that goes with leadership and church life and discipling and preaching and everything that goes on with it, and say, how could I do that even 1% better? How could I up the game? How could I keep the brand promise? How do I take accountability for things that go wrong? Now, when we cross into people's social domains, we're crossing into intensely personal territory. I don't need to tell any of you, you're all church leaders. People arc up, they flare, who do you think you are? Don't tell me what to do, this is my life. They may be joined to the body, but they really have no understanding of what it means to be part of the body. And as a result, if somebody comes along and tries to speak into these things, oftentimes they resent it. But it's nearly impossible to overstate the sensitivity that this thing that when we cross into people's social domains, the sensitivity that carries, and that's why we have to cultivate trust. And so any communications and any actions that violate trust are by definition on shaky ground. Now let me just pause here and say, there will be times you need to make decisions, or statements, or take actions where people aren't going to like it, and you just do it because it's the right thing to do. We never violate truth or principle. It's more when we play that kind of milquetoast thing where we're just sort of, people don't really know where we stand. This is part of the very issue we started out talking about with sexuality and why it's a problem. So, to our consumers, our parishioners. Now, in this case, I'm using parishioner and consumer interchangeably because the church is a service-driven business. It's like Telstra or the utility company. We don't make a product generally unless we manufacture and deliver, say, CDs or something like that. But we are a service business. And so to our consumers, our customers, whom we call parishioners, those who have allowed us into their circle of trust, our brand and that of our church and of our God has been elevated above dozens and maybe hundreds of other purchase criteria such that they are there with us. And there are ways to protect and nurture that trust. But it begins with responsible messaging and actions that benefit and protect our hearers. And so, to put it simply, they have to experience congruence between what they hear, what they observe, and what they experience emotionally. They have to experience congruence between what they hear, what they observe going on, and what they experience emotionally. If any one of those three breaks down, they'll be out of there. So lording over them, harsh or angry communications directed toward them, trying to extract anything from them for the benefit of either the institution or the leader, will send conflicting signals about who we are, what our churches are, or who our God is. Now take that and lay it down as a template on the whole discussion of what's going on in the Pell Commission, and you immediately see why it is such a big deal, and why it had the comparable behaviors had the same, or had the impact they had in Ireland, and are having in Australia. So here's a takeaway. People will forget what you said to them within a few minutes, but they will remember how you make them feel forever. So, back to something I said. I have people come to me all the time who need prayer for LGBT issues, or sometimes it's just porn and heterosexual stuff. And I've lost count of the many, many times people have said to me, I cannot believe how warm and embracing and caring and understanding you are. I came in here terrified because I knew you didn't believe in any of this stuff and you think it's wrong, but I've never felt so loved and affirmed in my life. But I don't compromise a bit on any of it. I mean, I've already told you where I stand on all this stuff. So there is a way to do that without losing the loyalty of people. Now, we are right at 3:32, and I'm going to stop because I want to honor the clock. I have 5 steps for building trust. This might become our message tomorrow rather than what I was going to do, but I'll think about it and we'll see what we do. But anyway, I'll give it back to you.